I'm Mehdi Hassan.
I'm Owen Jones.
And we're Too Outspoken. We're Too Outspoken live taping in London with a live audience. Look at this audience.
Wow. There are real people here.
They came for you, Owen.
No, I think, come on, the superstar's here. Mehdi, the thing is, I worry about you a lot, inordinately.
Oh.
I mean, I was a bit annoyed when you left 10 years ago. You fled this sinking shit.
10 years ago,
when
yes.
it all
Another
went to
anniversary. It's not just Zeteo's 1-year anniversary. It's 10 years since I left the UK.
10 years since the Great Betrayal, where this country went to shit. To be fair, the US has now gone to shit. But this is why I worry about you a little bit.
Yeah.
You've come here, you've come back, welcome.
Thank you.
Are you going to be let back in?
I mean, we're laughing. It's such a depressing thing to laugh about. I mean,
a dark question, but I actually am ironically asking you.
We mean to go on. I laugh and I cry at the same time about the state. Look, it's bad, right? We were just in Ramadan, Owen, and every Muslim gathering I went to, every brown person was like, what's your plan B? What's our plan B? Where are you moving to? Are you moving to UK, Canada, the Middle East, Malaysia? Where are you going? Everyone's got a plan B right now. People are worried. And also traveling. Can I go abroad? I've got friends of mine who are green card holders. They're cancelling trips abroad because they're worried they won't be let back into the country. There have been some real horror stories. I'm a citizen. I've been a naturalized citizen for 5 years. But of course, after green card holders, naturalized citizens are next. We know Donald Trump went after Mahmoud Khalil, who is right now detained, New York resident, green card holder, married to an American citizen. That was just kind of testing the water, in my view. I'm one of these people who thinks if it can happen to green card holders, it can certainly happen to naturalized citizens. So, look, am I worried about going back? Look, it's my constitutional right to enter the United States, not that Donald Trump gives a damn about the Constitution. There's all these stories about horror stories about your devices at the border. It's not a good time. I mean, tourism, Owen, I just saw that is completely down from Europe. America's allies, people in the UK, in Ireland, in Canada especially, don't want to visit the US, and you can't blame them, right? Who would want to go? The horror stories. The horror stories from people coming into the country for scientific reasons, academic reasons, visits, people being, there was a French scientist thrown out because he had a text on his phone criticizing Donald Trump. You've got people on student visas being treated horrifically badly. So it's funny because Donald Trump's also selling, because he's a grifter, a $5 million Trump card, which he says you can purchase and come live in the US. Why would you buy a card for $5 million to live in a country that he can kick you out of tomorrow with no due process? Makes no sense.
I mean, the other thing is, look, Zeteo is flourishing. It's great to see.
Thanks to you and others.
Well, I mean, come on. I think people in the room, big applause for
Thanks to the audience.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks to the audience.
But yeah, I've been to Hungary, and Hungary's quite an interesting playbook, which is, it's not a democracy anymore, Hungary. But, what they do... They
call themselves an illiberal democracy. Exactly.
That's his shtick. That's Orban's shtick. But they found ways of shutting it down, which weren't tanks on the streets, firing squads. They got pro-Orban business people to take over the media. Other countries, like in Putin's Russia, they just corruption charges, all that kind of thing, or tax issues with media companies. I mean, that's the worry. They can come after. I mean, he's already suing media organisations. The idea of vexatious suits. I mean, does that worry you?
Yes, we've had many conversations with lawyers over the last few weeks. Unfortunately, we live in a country now where the First Amendment... America was the country that looked down on the UK. Oh, look at your libel laws. Look at your lack of a First Amendment. Look at your lack of free speech protections. And now they're heading down. Musk and Trump keep doing frivolous lawsuits. And it's not just the lawsuits. I mean, you talk about the Orban playbook and the Erdogan playbook and the Modi playbook of getting rich businessmen to buy out media companies. Best way of neutering them. Buy out institutions.
Maybe Elon Musk will buy Zeteo.
Yeah, it's not for sale.
Okay.
He might try and bankrupt us, but we're not going to sell it to him. Imagine what different world we'd live in if Twitter hadn't put themselves for sale to him. Imagine what the world would live in now, one of those counterfactuals. But what I would say, which is so dangerous right now, and I love the fact that we've been here a year and you're one of our biggest contributors, but you still can't say Zeteo. But I love you, Owen.
Zeteo.
You sound like a Brit on holiday. Can you show me the way to Zeteo?
Zeteo.
I'm
saying it my own personalised way.
None of us were alive when Aristotle and Socrates were saying it. So maybe you're right.
Some sort of
maybe
xenophobic hate crime against ancient Greeks.
Yeah, ancient Greeks. hate crime from Owen Jones against ancient Greek. Where was I? Yes. So let's talk tariffs, for example. The tariffs right now. A lot of people are trying to get their heads around the tariffs. Part of that I mean, there are multiple reasons why Trump does anything. Part of the reason for the tariffs is a corruption move, right? So Donald Trump puts in tariffs, and then there's always a waiver. Certain people get exemptions from tariffs. Guess who in his first term got all the exemptions from the tariffs he did in his first term? People who donated to the Republican Party. He was asked the other day, who are going to get the waivers? And he said, some people will. And they said, how are you going to work it out? And he said, instinctively. And that was Trump's response. So part of it is just corruption. It's a good way of controlling big business, bringing them to heel in the same way he's brought universities to heel, big law firms to heel, all the different media outlets to heel. And then partly it is ignorance, right, Owen? I mean, sometimes I know people in the UK are sitting here trying to work out, Keir Starmer's probably having intense meetings with economists about what's going on, what do we do about our special... Sometimes I think we overthink this stuff. And I think it is just, we have to accept the fact that Trump is a moron. And much of what he does is because he doesn't understand what he's dealing with. He doesn't understand trade. He always says, no one knows more than me about any issue. And it's always projection. He knows the least about that issue. He thinks a trade deficit is the same thing as a budget deficit. He doesn't understand what a trade deficit is. He recently said, if any country has a trade deficit, it's like they're raping us, right? We're being taken for a ride, he thinks, which is insane, right? Of course you're going to have trade deficits with certain countries who sell you more than you buy from them. As someone pointed out recently, you have a trade deficit with your grocery store. Everyone in this room may have a trade deficit with Tesco or Asda, right? Because they buy more than Asda buys from them. That's normal. But Trump's brain doesn't understand this stuff. He lives in a weird reality-free zone.
Well, it's funny with tariffs, isn't it? Because I think what people have fallen into maybe a trap of is thinking, because there's this division between, is this all a master plan or is this just random knee-jerk stuff? Like he's just saying any old shit. It's because he outmaneuvered the entire Republican establishment against the odds.
Yes,
and then he
twice.
Outmaneuvered the Democratic establishment twice against the odds. So people then think, well, he's
a genius.
Exactly, because look what he managed to do against all the possible odds. So therefore, they apply that to everything, including, say, tariffs.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Yes, and there's a desire not to accept what is staring us in the face, which is the world's most powerful country, the world's richest country, the most scientifically advanced country in the history of mankind, has now twice elected an absolute moron to be commander-in-chief. And this is a reality. Don't take it from me, there was a quote from one of Trump's advisors in his first term that sticks with me. He says, whenever journalists are analyzing Trump, they're always like, well, is he playing 3D chess? Right? You always hear that phrase, he's playing 3D chess. And this advisor said, off the record, because they're all scared of him, he said he's not playing 3D chess, he's eating all the pieces. Right? Like, he just doesn't follow any rules, any conventions. He's using sheer brute force to get his way, he's a mob boss. He blackmails and, corruptly gets to where he needs to be. And it is an indictment of American society and American media and American politics that this carnival barker has managed to defeat two of their top people in the last 10 years. Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris were seen as very, very, capable politicians, risen to the top of America. They both got beaten by Donald Trump. One with the popular vote, one without, but both beaten. And I think we just don't want to talk about the fact that the tariff, I'll give you one example of the tariff thing. People are like, why is he so obsessed with tariffs? Oh, why is it because it's really simple, actually. The New York Times did a story a few years ago. Donald Trump went to buy a piano from the movie Casablanca. Right? It was up for auction in 1988, I think it was. And he got outbid by a Japanese financial services company. And the following year, he went on TV and said, we need to start tariffing Japan. It's always personal grievance. And Japan was the China of the 80s, those of you old enough to remember that. Japan's coming for us, the Asian superpower. Now it's China. It's the same thing. He's just petty, personal grievance, power plays. It's not economics. It's not geopolitics. It's not 3D or 4D chess.
Well, okay, what's going to happen now? This is what I'm interested in, because people voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Partly because of prices. I mean, I was going around Trump rallies around the Rust Belt.
Yeah, you were in the
US. And it was people, prices, migrants, and war. People were, it was odd. They sounded like racist peace sticks. It was very bizarre. But prices was definitely a big factor. What's going to happen? The prices are suddenly going to hike. Yeah. A lot of those Americans were struggling who did vote for because they felt their lives weren't getting any better.
Yes.
I mean, because there's a hardcore pro-Trump.
There's a hardcore pro-Trump,
and then there's the rest who are.
And then there's people who will peel off, right? There are whatever you want to call them, swing voters, independents, people who have buyer's remorse. And that is a chance for the Democrats in 2026 and 2028 to do that. But again, you guys have seen this here. We're in the UK, we're in London, which is a city that voted mostly against Brexit, if memory serves me correctly. Like, you know, in this country, many of you in the audience, I don't know what your breakdown on Brexit is, but you know, if you're anti-Brexit, if you're a Remainer, you know over the last few years, as the British economy has gone to shit, as it has become very clear that leaving the EU was an economic mistake, if nothing else, you know that some of your neighbours who voted to leave will not accept that. Right? It doesn't matter how much rational argument engaged in. So a lot of this is culture wars. It is kind of confirmation bias. So a lot of people, you know, you said you met Trump voters who said prices bother them. Prices are now still going up. They're going to go up much further with tariffs. And those same people are going to rationalize it, Owen. They're going to say it's fine. It's the price we pay to fix America. It's what the leader says, the dear leader. Right? That's when you live in a kind of autocratic society, a culture society. And that's a real problem. You know, you said war, right? A lot of Republicans were anti-war. That's true. And now he's threatening to bomb Iran like it's never been bombed before. There's a phrase he used recently. So there's a lot of contradictions there. I do think there are opportunities to kind of break down some of that Trump culture, but it's going to be hard.
It's interesting, the big rallies of Bernie Sanders and AOC, and there was a lot of energy there. These are massive, tens of thousands of people turning up in often quite small cities.
Yes.
What's that? Is that significant? Is there some wind behind the
It's
sails?
hugely significant because it shows that people aren't just opposed to Trump, which is the kind of top-line Democratic Party, like, let's say I'll hate Trump, which is easy, but actually don't just want to get rid of Trump, they want a better alternative. They don't just want the status quo. The big mistake from the Labour Party in the UK, whether it's the French centre-left, whether it's the American Democrats, you and I have talked about this many times on this show, is thinking that it's just enough to be against the fascists. Yeah. It's not enough. You have to provide a positive alternative. You have to provide something better, something to vote for, not just vote against. And I think Bernie and AOC get that. We are seeing really good turnout of people. Like, the only way you stop fascists is people power. And people think, oh, you know, protesting doesn't do anything, voting doesn't do anything. In a small town in New York State where Tom Homan, who's the Trump border czar, who my colleague John Harwood at Zeteo called the face of Donald Trump's cruelty. Just look at him. He just looks like a cruel man, and when he opens his mouth, he is a cruel man. He's the guy deporting even American citizens proudly. He says he'll deport. They rounded up a woman and her 3 children in this small little town of 1,300 people, and they put third graders, 8 years old, they put him in handcuffs. That's what we're doing in America now. 8-year-old kids put in handcuffs and detain them. 1,300 people live in that town where Tom Homan lives. It's his town. 1,000 people turned up to protest outside his house. Right, so the entire town turned up for their local undocumented neighbors. That's what we need to see more of. And guess what? They released the family. So these people can be beaten, right? Don't let anyone tell you that it's hopeless. Because again, that's what they want, right? They want us to be hopeless.
But I mean, I see these crowds and it does look exciting, but is the battle for the heart and soul of the Democrats? Is it just going to be the right-wing faction who, you know, the whole narrative, we weren't right-wing enough, we weren't pro-corporate enough, we weren't racist enough?
Yes.
Is that going to triumph despite this energy that we're seeing?
I don't know. I think they're going to try. Because I said to a lot of lefties last year, and Muslim voters as well, who wanted to punish Democrats rightly for the genocide in Gaza, a lot of the argument was, if we defeat the Democrats, they'll learn their lessons, and then next time around, they'll listen to us. And I kind of laughed and said, that's not how the Democratic Party works, right? Every time they lose, they move more to the right, not to the left. We saw that in 2016. We're going to see that a bit in 2024. But yes, some of us need to push back. I think Zeteo has been a home for voices who are pushing back against the kind of, as you say, this whatever you want to call it, the centrist, we're not right-wing enough, we're not tough on immigration enough, whether it's in the UK. Look, and I'm heavily promoting Zeteo tonight. We're here in London. It's our first event of our 5-city tour. We've got the merch. We've got the merch. You're not a real media company without merch. And we are here promoting Zeteo. It's the first city of our 5-city tour. It's amazing to be starting the tour in London with you. And I would say this, even in the UK, we have built up a presence now, slowly but surely, challenging a lot of what's going on. Owen was the first British contributor we brought on. It was no debate in my mind that Owen had to be the first British contributor. And we also now have Grace Blakely writing about economics for us, who's another fantastic journalist here in the United Kingdom. So we are trying to push that narrative. And let me ask you, Owen, how's it looking here in the UK as I drop by to see Keir Starmer's Britain? I mean, he came to the US. I think we met shortly after that, where he came back a triumphant man. He's won over Trump. The King's invited him for a meeting. How's it looking now post-tariffs?
Do you know what? It's interesting because when George Bush became president in 2001, the chief of staff to Tony Blair told the UK ambassador to the US, Christopher May, he said, you need to disappear up the arse of the United States, which worked out. It was a massive success, as we remember.
Oh, yeah. Iraq, wonderful.
Iraq, obviously, the bloodbath of Iraq, but the 160 or so British soldiers who died there.
Yes.
Afghanistan, where even more British soldiers, of course, were slaughtered. So we got blood and chaos. Tony Blair said we had to pay a blood price for our relationship with the United States.
Just he wasn't going to pay any blood.
Obviously, not him or his children. The children
His children are very wealthy now.
They're doing extremely well. One of them is,
meritocracy.
exactly. I mean, it's the British establishment, obviously. Generally, in Britain, especially if you actually commit war crimes, then you'll just keep on rising, be treated as an elder statesman. Hence, Tony Blair, I mean, it's annoying. You get interviews with Tony Blair, and it's just, you could ask
kill myself.
Well, yes, indeed. Just one question about receiving huge amounts of money from mass murdering autocrats like Kazakhstan or the Saudis. Not once, just deference, treating him as a statesman.
People always say to me when I do interviews, they say, who's your dream interview? And I always say Blair. Not because it's a dream, like it's a nightmare, but because he's never asked the questions that so many people here, so many people around the world would love to see him be asked. He's treated like he's some kind of, not just distinguished elder statesman, but like some master political pundit.
Absolutely. He's just
like
there
Mr. Blair, what do you think's happening in the Labour Party?
He's entirely there for his wisdom. He's never critiqued, never
held to account.
But you can see the same thing. I mean, that's their strategy. It's we disappear up Donald Trump's arse.
That's the Starmer, and they sent Peter Mandelson to do it.
Absolutely. And Peter Mandelson, again, just came out, obsequious, trashing the Democrats for their positioning. Yep. But I mean, we can see, as we know, obviously, disappearing up the arse of a bully is always a very effective strategy. But he went there and he did that whole performance and he got nothing out of it. I mean, literally no concessions on Ukraine or anything whatsoever.
And he got tariffed.
And he got tariffed anyway. And then there was this idea, well, actually, he was treated more generously than everybody else. No, he wasn't. The tariffs that were applied here were on the same level as other countries in the same circumstance. But I think, what you've seen was interesting is they thought that a lot of the British commentariat, they got flown out because the one thing you've got to understand about most British commentators is they think they live in West Wing, right? They watch the West Wing a lot and they think they're characters in West Wing. So they got flown out to the United States. They were in the White House and they were like, we're actually in the West Wing. And they went gooey-eyed and they were like, Starmer's this great statesman and all the rest of it. And then the next day, obviously Zelensky got completely humiliated, introduced by the double act.
Office, yeah.
But they said the whole point, and this is what various commentators said, they said this is a great relaunch because Keir Starmer is slightly less popular than the bubonic plague in this country, somewhere between bubonic plague and cholera. But his ratings have collapsed, and it was this idea he'll relaunch himself because what obviously Keir Starmer did is he came to power by default, which is because the Tories had set themselves on fire, politically speaking. We had Liz Truss, cost of living crisis, Boris Johnson, NHS collapsing, unprecedented squeeze in living standards. And they still only won 33.7% of the vote on the lowest turnout in British democracy.
Basically about 1 in 5 Brits, wasn't it? Roughly?
Exactly. And then they thought, we'll come to power and we'll get respect by taking tough decisions like freezing grannies. I mean, scrapping the winter...
The real menace to British democracy. The grannies with heating.
And then, kept the two-child benefit cap, which drives so many kids into poverty. And now they've gone after disabled people. And it comes to something, by the way, when Michael Gove, probably one of the most odious politicians in the country, when he said, if a Conservative government, had introduced measures like that, punishing disabled people as much as that, he would have resigned on principle. Because what this will do is drive huge numbers of disabled people further into poverty or into poverty at all. So
I bet there are a bunch of people around Starmer who saw that Gove quote and thought, cool.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
really good.
Absolutely.
That shows we're doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
We're outrighting the Tory right.
In fact, the one way I think of summing up the politics of a lot of people in Downing Street is if the left squeal about it, we're doing the right thing. But the problem is that hasn't worked because this country is in a mess. It's in a huge, it's the economic model plus austerity, Tory rule. And actually, there is actually the ability to fix that. We've got huge wealth. We could introduce taxes, wealth taxes, redistribute wealth and power. But instead, what they've chosen to do is empty the pockets of disabled people. And it's gone down. I mean, because their wisdom is, well, people, people hate scroungers, we'll kick them. Yeah. But actually, the polling showed it was deeply unpopular. And the point about the Trump thing is, and Ukraine is, they thought that would help save Keir Starmer. That would, turn him into a global statesman. Ultimately, politicians get judged not on empty posturing, it hasn't achieved anything abroad, but on whether...
But the media have wished it. I've seen the media say, this is his moment.
That's exactly what they said.
To lead the Western world.
And they were willing that to happen.
Yes.
And he did get a slight bounce, but then has plummeted back to where he was in the first place.
It's funny that you said they could do wealth taxes, they could do this, that. They could do basically all the things they promised they would do in the past. Like Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer are on record saying they supported this stuff until they didn't. They've suspended members of their party for voting for things that were Labour policy like 2 years ago.
Well, that's right? For example, they kicked out 7 Labour MPs, suspended them, because they voted against the two-child benefit cap, which drives, it's the biggest single generator of child poverty in this country. But I mean,
that was Labour policy to...
Well, of course. Well, look, Keir Starmer became Labour leader because he promised public ownership, increasing taxes on the rich, scrapping tuition fees.
Very Blair-esque, right? Run as a lefty to get the leadership.
Not at all. Oh, come on, that's very unfair, Tony Blair. That's the one time I would defend Tony Blair.
That's true.
Tony Blair did not run as Labour leader.
No, but he called himself a socialist and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, but he basically said that was motherhood and apple pie. He didn't stand to be the more...
No, that's true. He did stand to be a reformer.
He did say, I'm the competent Tony Benn. I mean, basically, Keir Starmer was like, I'm Jeremy Corbyn in a suit, who will be more inclusive and more sellable. And now he's ended up basically to the right of Tony Blair.
Tony Blair without the charisma, as I often say. The one thing they've really U-turned on that we must talk about is Gaza, in the sense that David Lammy, for example, the foreign secretary, who we both know, was very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. Very, very, very critical. More critical than it even was of Trump. And yet now he's the guy who, puts out some performative condemnations, but doesn't do anything about it. Keir Starmer, just the other day, Owen, after the Russians bombed Ukrainian civilian targets on Palm Sunday, put out a statement saying, I'm horrified by these horrific attacks. So he said, I'm appalled, I think he said, by these horrific attacks he tweeted by the Russians. You have followed his tweets more closely than I have over the last 18 months. Has he ever said, I'm appalled by the horrific attacks by Israel on Gaza? No,
and I did a search. Keir Starmer has never once condemned Israel for a single attack on civilians. Not once. And, what he rightly condemned, what was a war crime committed by the Russian army in Ukraine, those sorts of attacks have happened almost every day. And crucially, they've happened partly because of the components made in this country which are crucial for the F-35 jets which rain death and destruction on the people of Gaza. And what we've seen are tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been butchered. They have been buried alive, cooked alive, including newborn babies. Over 1,000 babies alone, at least, have been killed in the most hideous ways possible. And that's been facilitated by British bombs. Now, they suspended 8% of arms deals, only 8%, and they essentially bent over backwards apologising, saying what a great ally Israel is. But it must be said that Keir Starmer has not disguised his obvious belief that Palestinian life means very little. At the beginning of this crisis, at the beginning of the genocide, Keir Starmer, and he should never be forgiven for this, when he was asked if a siege, including cutting off water and energy, was appropriate, he said, I think Israel has that right, and then tried to gaslight everyone into believing he didn't. And the fact is, what he did there, he's a human rights lawyer. I'm not a human rights lawyer. I know what Article 33 of the Geneva Convention says, which legally prohibits collective punishment. That That man used his platform at a crucial moment when he could have put pressure on the British government,
Yes.
when British public opinion did not support what Israel was doing from the very beginning, to say we should not be complicit in war crimes. Instead, he said Israel has the right to commit war crimes, and has since then continued to talk about the horrors suffered by Israeli hostages, which no one doubts, never condemn Israel for its war crimes, and keep arming them as they commit genocide. And that man, in my opinion, should end up being prosecuted for war crimes, just like anybody else who facilitates war crimes.
So, I'm in front of a live audience in London, trying to mark Zeteo's 1-year anniversary, so I've got to say this. One of the reasons I was so keen, Owen, for you to join Zeteo was not just because I admire you as a journalist and because we've been friends for 15 odd years. It's also because since October the 7th, you are one of the only voices with a mainstream platform in this country who has consistently condemned British government, whether Tory or Labour, complicity in the genocide. And you've taken a lot of shit for it. And history will judge that you were on the right side of this, and most of the British media were not.
But that is very kind, but I mean, before I just say, obviously, what you've done, you've taken so much shit for opposing this genocide too, and done such amazing work. But look, more than people like us deserve praise, the people who
Palestinian journalists.
Well, firstly, the Palestinian journalists, absolutely, who've suffered the biggest slaughter of journalists in human history, slaughtered often alongside their entire families for reporting the truth to the world. But I don't just want to praise them, and it's crucial we praise them, because none of us would know what's happening to the people of Palestine without them. We should condemn not just the people who cheerleaded this, it's the journalists who stayed silent.
Yes.
So many journalists know a great evil is being committed. And I know they're scared. They're scared they'll get smeared. They're scared their careers will suffer. Well, they're not scared of being bombed alongside their entire families. And I'll tell you this, the people throughout history, it's not just the people who cheerlead the crimes who allow it to be possible, it's the people who stay silent.
Yes.
And the journalists who stay silent,
well said,
should never be forgiven.
Well said. Well said. We've got to... I'm being told we have to go to the audience, but before we go to the audience, I cannot finish the discussion without bringing up someone who is of great interest to Owen and I, especially on this issue of Israel, and that is a man named Douglas Murray, who has been back in the news recently, not just because Donald Trump endorsed his new book, Defending Israel, but he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And there's a clip that went viral. Some of supporters think it was really good, where he called out a comedian, libertarian comedian, Dave Smith, who's Jewish but anti-Israel, and he said to him, "Have you never been there? Have you never been there? How can you comment on somewhere you've never been to?" And he said, "I make it a rule of my journalism never to talk about a country, even in passing, that I haven't visited." What was your reaction when you saw Douglas Murray say that?
I had a couple of instant responses, I have to say. I think, firstly, so he's never condemned can't condemn North Korea. Never been there.
Never been there.
Shut up, Douglas. But if...
Literally, he talks about Iran every other week.
All the
He's never
time.
been to Iran, as far as I'm aware.
But, for example, if some pro-Iranian delegation from Britain went to Iran and came back and went, "Oh, it's a wonderful... everyone leave it alone." Or the Stalin Society went to North Korea and came back and went, "Everyone leave North Korea alone, it's great." Would Douglas Murray go, "Well, we need to defer to them. They've been there. They know what they're talking about."
It's such a bullshit argument.
It's obviously ridiculous. I mean, all of his... I have to say, I mean, his whole... this is ad hominem, but he really does increasingly sound like some sort of one-dimensional villain in a film, doesn't he? Just his really bizarre...
He just needs a pussycat.
Yeah, do you know, just very disturbing delivery. But he also, I mean, just, you know, he said, for example, why would, the Israeli army want to go and kill kids? Well, I don't ask the Israeli army, but, well, I mean, often you've got debates on Israeli TV where they talk about children being legitimate targets, but dozens of US-based medics have testified about children being sniper shotted in the head and the chest. And equally, for example, one program alone by the Israeli army, revealed by 972 plus 972 in Israeli-Palestinian magazine, which showed that the Israeli army, for every low-level judged Hamas target, 20 civilians are legitimate collateral damage, including children. And one of those programs is they wait for that low-level non-entity to go back to their home, and they know their children, they know exactly how many people are there. They wipe it out. And do you know what the program's called? Where's Daddy? Yeah. Now, Douglas Murray asked, why would they want to kill all these children? Well, we know in this genocide that there has been industrialized slaughter, and you do not need to go there, but those US-based medics have been
Yes.
there. They serve in those
He
hospitals.
doesn't listen to them, weirdly.
And he doesn't listen to
So
them.
British doctors, Australian doctors, Canadian doctors, American doctors have gone out and said, we saw Israelis killing Palestinian kids. We've seen gunshot wounds. Said he doesn't trust them.
What would he say
But he
about
talks about him going out there. I mean, he's gone with, as an embed with the Israeli military. He got given an award by the Israeli president. This is not journalism as anyone understands journalism.
It was a government-organised trip.
But the really painful part about that Joe Rogan clip is I watch, as someone who's debated, I debated Murray last year in Canada. I took a shower afterwards. But as someone who has debated Murray for many years, including on the BBC, like when I saw that clip of him on Rogan, I actually half agreed with the wider point he was making, which is that right-wing media and podcasting does need to be a little bit more fact-based and have experts on and not just let everyone run their own mouth. I don't have a problem with the argument that Joe Rogan, for example, needs to have some vaccine experts on, I would argue. People who actually know what they're talking about in certain fields. The problem is Douglas Murray is not an expert himself. No. Right? What is he an expert on? I hate to say this. I went to university. I went to Oxford at the same time as Murray. Ooh. He and I went to Oxford at the same time. I didn't know. Shock horror, we moved in different circles. I did not know Douglas Murray at university. But last time I checked, he has an undergraduate degree in English. That is it, right? So if I want to hear from Douglas Murray on Oscar Wilde or William Shakespeare, sure, but on everything else, shut the fuck up. I mean...
Yeah. No, Mehdi. Unless you've gone on an IDF tour of Gaza, organised by the IDF, then you can't say anything.
No, you can't say.
Because he knows about Gaza because he's been with the IDF, of course. Embedded.
Journalism.
That's journalism.
Journalism today, as Owen. Okay, we talked.
And he got an award from the President of Israel, which is completely normal behaviour for journalists.
Can you imagine if you got an award from like Mahmoud Abbas? Imagine what people would do to you. All right, on that note about the ongoing failures of Western journalism, let us take questions from our audience here, our live taping of Two Outspoken, our first live taping here in London. We've got microphones going around the audience. Please try and ask questions, don't give speeches. Let us go to gentleman in the front row, since he's had his hand out first, and then we'll move around.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure, a privilege to be listening to you live, Mehdi, a family of great admirers. In fact, both my sons and my grandson are here.
Fantastic.
And we miss you a lot, actually, not being here all the time, and hope you'll one day come back. And agree everything you said about Owen Jones. He is also a source of great comfort and confidence when we are tackling these very difficult issues which are facing us in terms of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred.
I'm going to ask for a question, politely. Thank you for your praise. Can we have a question?
The question is this, really. You're referencing what happens in America eventually ends up in this country as well. Well, we know we've got Donald Trump there now for second term. And on that basis, on that hypothesis, who do you see as somebody who might end up one day being our British Trump in this country? And where will the Muslims go in those circumstances?
Oh, and you and I have talked before about you worrying about Farage literally being the next Prime Minister of the UK.
Well, it's plausible, I'm afraid. I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, at the moment, in the opinion polls, it's basically evenly dividing between Labour, the Tories and Reform. And the danger is, what if the Tories... I think what will happen is Kemi Badenoch will go. She's useless. Look, I mean, it's embarrassing at this point. And I think Robert Jenrick will take over and form some...
The man who wants to criminalise Allahu Akbar on the street.
Well, he's to the right of Nigel Farage in some ways. And you could see then a pact between the Conservative Party and Reform. And, like, some Conservatives won't vote for that, and they might go to the Lib Dems or whatever. But the danger is, under our electoral system, it's where the cookie crumbles, and you could win. You could end up plausibly. Well, they won on 33.7% of the vote, Labour, and they're crumbling in different directions. Yeah. My view is the left needs to get its act together, because at the moment it's we don't have leadership that's kind of inspiring people. That's crumbling in lots of different directions. But at the moment, there's no enthusiasm behind Labour. They're not offering any enthusiasm for people to vote for them. And Nigel Farage could end up winning by default. I think that's entirely plausible.
Dangerous, depressing. Okay, let's go back to the audience. Let's take the lady here in the second row, and then we'll go to the gentleman on the end row there. Can we get the microphone here in the middle? Yes, the lady here in the middle.
Hi, thank you both for this event. It's really, really great. We had a question earlier about our difficulty in voting as, public in the UK. Could one of you please run for Prime Minister so I can vote for someone that I actually want to lead me, please?
I think that would have to be Owen.
I could barely tie my shoelaces, so I don't think...
Have you met Boris Johnson?
If I was... Okay. If I was an older Tony who couldn't tie my shoelaces...
Oh, yes, that's true. Only older
to...
Tonians who can't tie their shoelaces. When I was a teenager, I said I want to be the first Asian Prime Minister of the UK. And a couple of years back, all my friends texted me saying, looks like it was Rishi Sunak then. What a way to lose that one. Yes, gentleman there on the end.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Welcome, Mehdi, back to your hometown. And lovely to see you both. Andy, Owen, hats off to you, man. Great job. Please continue doing what you're doing. I had a quick question on a quote from a Palestinian called Omar al-Akkad, who said that one day everyone will have always been against this. So looking ahead, do you guys see that one day happening anytime soon, or when?
It's a great quote. It's Mustafa al-Akkad, who's an Egyptian-Canadian novelist who's got this book out. It's a fantastic book. I interviewed him for Zeteo. It's on our website. You can check it out. Yes, and the premise of that came from a very viral tweet of his, is that one day everyone will always have been against this. This idea, as you pointed out a moment ago so eloquently, Owen, that people are silent in times of great crimes. And then after everyone recognizes a crime, suddenly everyone's against it when it's easy, when there's no cost, when history's been rewritten. And the classic example of that is the Iraq War. Yeah. Right? Today, everyone's against the Iraq War, except Tony Blair, who's still for it. But everyone's against the Iraq. You know, Donald Trump often ran as I was anti the Iraq War. A lie. Donald Trump supported the Iraq War, but he lied and told people he was against it because it was seen as the populist position. So yes, I do think we will get to a point where people will be shamefully saying, Gaza? Of course, I was always against that. Sadly, though, to go to the crux of your question, we are not at that point right now. We still have enough people, not just the Douglas Murray ideologues type who proudly, happily defend Israel, but you still have enough people in the middle lazily doing the knee-jerk. If you ask the average British politician, correct me if I'm wrong, Owen, they're not gung-ho for Israel, but they'll say stuff like, well, we hope that all parties come to the table. We hope there's a two-state solution. And of course, we abhor the loss of life on all sides. That kind of crap, right? The both sidesism. And so we're not at that point yet where people are willing to come out en masse, at least public, I'm talking about the politicians, and say, you know what? I got this 100% wrong. I'm ashamed that I ever supported what Israel did. We're not at that point, sadly.
I'm torn over this. Okay. I don't want to depress everyone. I think if our species has a future, then this will be regarded as one of the great crimes of our age. And everyone who supported it will be damned. And I believe in that timeline, people will go to prison for what, and reputations will be ruined. But there is another timeline, which is if we allow this to be normalised, then the future of humanity is one where we descend ever more into fascist barbarism. And you can't rule that out. And then this is actually a foreshadow for worse to come. And one of the reasons it's so important to speak out against this genocide is, in its own right, to stop the mass slaughter of the Palestinian people. That's enough. But the normalisation of a live-streamed genocide, where the most heinous possible atrocities are being committed in full view of the world, with any claim of international law existing being completely traduced in the rubble of Gaza, if that is normalised, then far worse is going to come. So we have to fight this, not just for the Palestinian people, but I genuinely believe this depravity being normalised would be a precursor for much worse. So that's why we have to speak against this.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I do want to take some more questions. We're going to take from the back, the two corners. The gentleman there, no, second in, yeah, you, and then I don't know if that's a man or a woman, or somebody in the corner in the dark.
Yes. This question is more for Owen. I was wondering what you think the future of the left is here in the UK, because anyone who's outspoken in the left is smeared. If you look at Jeremy Corbyn and more recently Zara Sultana, who's still suspended from the Labour Party. So I was wondering your opinions on that.
Well, I think my own view is, look, I was a Labour guy. I was given a Labour Party membership on my 15th birthday. What a loser! And I quit last year. My mental health has been much better since. And my own view is, whatever people think about whether the Labour Party there was a future or not, with the Conservatives, they were transformed by UKIP, the Brexit Party, Reform Party. And I firmly believe without pressure from the left outside, that won't happen. But in any case, what I think should happen is Zara Sultana should defect to the Greens or join the Independents, or there should be I mean, I'd like Mick Lynch to lead something. I think that would be, Mick Lynch and Zara Sultana, I think would be a dream team. At the moment, I voted for the Greens. I don't think they're providing they're kind of invisible at the moment, if I'm honest. But I think the MPs who are suspended, for example, and other Labour MPs who clearly don't have a future in the Labour Party, they should quit en masse and form an alliance with the Greens. Which I think would achieve huge support, because those are big constituents out there. It's just not organised.
And it comes back to what I was saying earlier about, they want you to be hopeless.
Yeah.
The right, as you point out, Nigel Farage ran for Parliament, 7 times?
Yeah.
Before getting elected. I think he's got the second highest or most highest number of appearances on Question Time, despite never having held a parliamentary seat up until last year. And yet, whether we like or dislike Nigel Farage, hugely consequential figure, transformed British politics, but why can't it be done from the left?
Absolutely.
It can be done from the left. Question from the corner.
So, my name's Khadija, I'm a female. I suppose this is a question about hope. One of the reasons that I signed up to be a paid subscriber of Zeteo is because everywhere I looked, it was just pro-Israel, 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 and no one talked back. And I suppose that's what Zeteo gave me when I was hopeless. So I gained hope from you guys. So a personal question to both of you is, how do you both remain hopeful?
You can go first.
I think partly, often younger people in places like Britain and the United States who've organised, you've seen them in terms of climate, you've seen them in terms of the Palestinian justice movement. I think if you look at the United States, the number of younger Jewish Americans who've been at the forefront of Palestinian solidarity, 40% of Jewish Americans under 45 think Israel has committed genocide. That was many months ago. I'm sure it's hardened ever since. I think the reason I have hope is there are millions of people out there who obviously want justice, and I think the odds, what we face is so apocalyptic in terms of climate and war and all the rest of it, that something will have to give. And we already have the nucleus. We've got when I was a lad, I'm a geriatric millennial. When I was a teenager, young people were completely apathetic. There wasn't political engagement. And I know some younger people now particularly young men, have become radicalised to the right. I know that's a phenomenon. But I also see far more politicisation. And I think that provides the core. And I think the Gen Z will maybe end up saving us all. No pressure to Gen Z.
Or Gen Z, is where I live.
Oh, here we go again.
I'm kidding. Of course it's Z, Z-E-T-E-O. I would just answer your question. First of all, thank you for being a paid subscriber, my favourite people in the world right now. Appreciate your support. No, but genuinely, because we couldn't do this without you. That's just not even that's not a cliche, it's just a truth. And another truth that's not a cliche is it's very simple. I am deeply depressed about the state of the world. I'm quite a pessimistic person. You only have to ask my wife and kids. I'm very negative. I wake up every day thinking, oh, it's going to be a bad day, right? I'm not optimistic. But optimism and hope are two different things, right? You can be hopeful without being optimistic. I'm not sunny. Everything's going to be amazing. But I also try not to lose hope, because hope is not some end goal. Hope is a process. It's something we're doing every day. It's something we're retaining every day. It's a struggle, all right, to keep hope alive, to borrow an old saying. So for me, when you say what gives me hope, it changes from day to day. Today, it's all of you. I'm sitting on a stage staring at nearly 300 people who turned out for an event for a media organization that did not exist 365 days ago. So for me, hope is people coming together with common goals, showing solidarities, believing in a better world, and not letting the daily shit get us down, because we are actually stronger together than we are separately. And one thing I say to Americans all the time, you made the point about the British numbers, 1 in 5. With Americans, it's the same thing. When Donald Trump got 49% of the vote on a 60% turnout, the thing I have to keep reminding my fellow Americans, there are more of us than there are of them. And that is what keeps hope alive for me on every single day. And there's one quote that sticks with me from Desmond Tutu at the height of the anti-apartheid struggle in the 80s, when it looked so bad for the anti-apartheid movement. Mandela is in prison, and Tutu says, hope is being able to see the light despite all the darkness. Right, despite all the darkness, for you to be able to see the darkness is the standard, right? That's nothing new. We're not fighting against anything new here, but we have to carry on seeing the light despite all of it. Well, yeah. Should we take 2 more questions and then we're done? Lady here, did we already take a question from you? I feel like we already earlier in the night. We'll take it from some others before we come back to you. Gentleman here. Okay, that was someone else at the back, but gentleman here.
I know.
Gentleman here, and then the woman there, sorry. Go on, let's keep them fast and we'll get it done. I like it when multiple people point at someone to take. I'm like, yeah, group
Hi,
action.
thank you both so much for your amazing work. You deserve every penny of my subscription fees. I just wanted to ask, Emily Thornberry seems to have suddenly grown a conscience. Do you think it's going to last?
Every who?
Emily Thornberry seems to have suddenly grown a conscience.
I'm going to leave that one
Do you
to
think it's
Owen.
gonna
I know
last?
Owen is a very... Emily Thornberry has grown a conscience.
Emily Thornberry. Emily Thornberry's my local MP. We used to get on very well, actually. Very, very well. Then she went and spoiled it all by saying something stupid like supporting war crimes on national television. That's what she did. She could never wash that away. After Keir Starmer's disgraceful contribution, she went on national television and she was repeatedly asked if it was legal for Israel to cut off water, energy, food, and all the rest of it. And she refused to answer, but she said Israel has the absolute right to defend itself, and that is an appropriate answer to your question right now. Now, Emily Thornberry helped legitimise the most heinous possible war crimes, and I would note the ICC arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, his former defence minister, focuses on the question of starvation, which is what she used her platform to legitimise. Now, Emily Thornberry's growing a conscience. That's not, just be clear. She didn't grow a conscience over the mass slaughter of children. She didn't grow a conscience over the mass destruction of hospitals, the mass murder of medics, the annihilation of Gaza. She got a conscience because of the mistreatment of British parliamentarians. She got annoyed once because she said they were secretly videoed, some MPs, a delegation, and then two Labour MPs were refused entry to Israel and deported, and I'm not justifying that. Obviously, they were there to tell the truth about what was going on the West Bank, that's why they were kicked out. But no, not to belittle their treatment, they weren't tortured and raped and murdered in captivity like so many Palestinian hostages, which is what we should be calling them. They were inconvenienced, and it was annoying. And Emily Thornberry has only ever shown anger over British parliamentarians and basically being mistreated in that way. And that shows she does not see Palestinian life, in my opinion, as having meaningful worth. And I've told her, she blocked me on Instagram, my local MP, she will never wash away the shame of going on national television and legitimising war crimes, never.
So, Owen, tell us what you really think about Emily Thornberry.
I used to get on really well with her.
Last question of the night. Yes, sorry, you get the last word.
My question is about BBC News and the bias. Like most of the people here, I'm sure they're fed up with the bias that we've been fed down our throats for the last 18 months. Your expose, Owen, was fantastic when you told us about the bias and the obviousness of what's the atrocities that are going on in Gaza and the lack of reporting by BBC. Did you get any reports from the BBC? Do you have any hope that they might actually give us factual, truthful information about what's actually happening in Gaza?
I want to pay tribute to the whistleblowers who spoke to me. I spoke to 13... Oh, hey! Oh, wow. That's funny. Former BBC presenter. Well, it's because I'm not supposed to out sources. So, outed yourself. Well, please do give a massive applause to Karishma Patel. So Karishma's doing amazing work debunking and just showing, if you go to, what's your Twitter handle so I can everyone say your Twitter handle? Karishma Patel 99. Twitter feed very eloquently dissects BBC headlines, shows what's wrong. I did speak to Karishma, there's one of my sources, great, so not lying. By
the way, 99 is not your year of birth, is it? No. No, because Owen used to put his year of birth in his Twitter handle.
Big mistake!
And I'll never let him live that down. But sorry, Karen, I
changed it when I turned 40. And everyone noticed it. You only did that because you turned 40. And I was like, yes, I did, yeah.
Owen Jones, 84. I remember.
Yeah, I know. I was 25 at the time. Big error. Anyway, there's a systemic problem at the BBC in what the dehumanisation of Palestinian life, the deferring uncritically to Israeli narratives, treating Israeli sources and claims as deferring to them in a way they would never dream of doing to Russian claims, often framing stories about Israeli atrocities around IDF denials, omission, not platforming Palestinian voices and experiences. What am I missing? There's loads of stuff, Krishma. Loads of stuff. We could go, and it's an endless list. It's a systemic problem.
Yes.
And what I would say, I mean, there's a debate going amongst the whistleblowers. Do we stay and try and change things from within, or do we leave and use our platforms to apply? And Charisma's doing an amazing job, and has got a book coming out as well. I've just become her PR agent. But my view is, look, whether it will change or not, we have to use our pressure because it's a public broadcaster.
Yes.
We're the license fee payers. British public opinion, despite what they're being fed by the media, 70% think Israel's committed war crimes. The most of people think Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested. It should be it's not a violation of objectivity to point out the systematic violations of international law that Israel is guilty of, to call a spade a spade. And I think we have to build pressure as given it's supposed to be responsive to us. Will that happen? I don't know. And will the BBC, does it have a future? I don't know. But I know and social media calling it out has had an impact, and they've been forced to change headlines because of social media outcry.
So I want to say something about the headlines before we finish. It's funny, I was just talking to Sangeeta Maiska earlier in that very chair, and she made the point that the BBC values impartiality.
Oh, hey.
Oh, Sangeeta's there. Since this is a whole separate show, give it up for Sangeeta Maiska. She and I were talking about BBC impartiality, which you can all watch. That interview will be coming out soon. And one thing is, what fascinates me about Israel and the BBC is impartiality, because the defense is, we've got to be impartial. BBC presenters will shut down Palestinian guests and say, well, of course, Israel says that's not true, what you just said. And they think that they're being impartial. I have no doubt that if you kind of lie detected those BBC hosts, in their heads, they think, I'm just being fair. I'm just following the rules. What's so interesting is that whole playbook has been exploded by Ukraine. Right? Because we have a real-world example of how the BBC can treat a foreign conflict where war crimes are being committed and agency is ascribed, right? And Asal Rad, I would urge you all to follow Asal Rad on Twitter, who is an academic. She's written for Zeteo on how the headlines compare. She just does an amazing job of just lining up the BBC's headline on Gaza versus the BBC headline on Ukraine. When Russia bombs a hospital, the BBC will say, Russia bombed the hospital. They will ascribe agency. They will say it killed kids. When it's Gaza, it's, we don't know who bombed the hospital, spontaneously exploded. Maybe children were killed, but Hamas Health Ministry says so we can't try. Like, the BBC is absolutely shameful when it comes to its coverage of Gaza versus Ukraine. I don't even need to criticize the BBC just on Gaza. Just compare it to Ukraine, and it's job done.
Well, you saw the headline the other day. I mean, you just can't make this shit up. It said, Hamas claims Israel strikes hospital when Israel had admitted to bombing the hospital. I mean, it's just beyond a farce. I mean, and
with the 15 medics, you did an excellent video just pointing out how ridiculous the BBC.
Well, in that, the BBC, they literally stop. Because what they do is they regurgitate these claims uncritically, and they uncritically regurgitated an IDF spokesperson claiming that they had buried the bodies of the medics they'd executed to protect them from being eaten by wild animals. What the fuck?
I mean, imagine being a journalist who wrote that down and put your name to that.
Like,
although on the BBC website, you conveniently don't have to offer.
Would they just regurgitate what Russian sources claiming that? It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd, and it should be called out because it's complicity.
I actually think BBC headlines have been worse than CNN, Fox, the New York Times over the last year. BBC, I didn't hear what the shout was.
Cancel the BBC licence, someone said. Oh,
now we all sound like Charles Moore on the Telegraph. Unfortunately, I want the BBC to be better. I've been someone who worked at the BBC, has defended the BBC, but its role in enabling Israel's genocide, as Owen has said, history will judge it harshly. And again, it's one of the reasons, sorry to wrap up by going back to why we're here, is why I didn't go to work for another organisation when I left MSNBC, because I thought all of them are doing a pretty bad job on the greatest moral issue of our time. Why not start my own to try and show people not just better coverage, but to show people that journalism can be done in a different way. There is nothing stopping us from calling a genocide, calling racism, calling fascism. You just need to have some guts. You just need to have people with integrity and skills on your side. And I'm glad that we as Zeteo have been able to come together, make an impact on the media landscape, scare and annoy the right people, and bring together the best people. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
And thank you. And I just want to say, I do want to thank Mehdi, because setting up a new media organisation, particularly in the current climate, it's a risk. And he's used his platform, this big mainstream platform. in a way where he can give a platform to other voices who otherwise would be marginalised and airbrushed. We needed Zeteo. It was something which, you know, if we didn't have it, we'd be in such a weaker position. So, Mehdi, thanks for your courage, your principle, and your ability, your huge abilities. We're very lucky to have you, and thanks for setting up Zeteo.
Thank you, Owen. And I just want to say, thank you for pronouncing Zeteo correctly. I'm Mehdi Hassan.
I'm Owen Jones.
And we were too outspoken. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you very much.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.